The late 1800s found Captain Samuel Johnson at the helm of the RMS Resolute, leading a crew of seasoned seafarers on a perilous journey into the heart of the infamous Bermuda Triangle. The ship's sails billowed in the brisk trade winds, propelling them ever closer to the mysterious region where countless ships had vanished without a trace. The air was thick with anticipation and trepidation as they navigated the treacherous waters, constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of the fabled island that was said to lie at the center of it all. As they drew nearer, a dense fog rolled in, obscuring all visibility and creating an eerie, disorienting atmosphere. The crew began to sense an unsettling change in the air, a palpable sense of dread that seemed to seep into their very bones. Strange whispers carried on the wind, their words indistinct but filled with anguish and despair. The men grew pale and jumpy, their eyes darting about in constant vigilance, searching for the source of the unearthly sounds. Captain Johnson, a man of iron will and unwavering determination, stood at the ship's rail, staring out into the misty gloom. He knew that the crew was relying on him to guide them through this ordeal, and he was not about to let them down. With a steadying breath, he turned to face them, his voice strong and commanding. "Man," he began, "I know that what we are about to face is unlike anything we have ever encountered. But I want you to remember that we are sailors, and we will face this challenge together. We will not let fear rule us." His words seemed to have a calming effect on the crew, and they nodded in agreement, steel returning to their eyes. As they continued to sail deeper into the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, the strange occurrences only intensified. Ghostly apparitions materialized out of thin air, their disembodied whispers carrying on the wind like a chorus of the damned. The men began to see eerie visions of their own loved ones, lost to the sea in past tragedies, their faces twisted in anguish and despair. The once strong crew grew weak, their minds consumed by nightmares that seemed to echo the very fate of the countless souls that had vanished before them. They began to question their sanity, wondering if they were doomed to share the same fate. But Captain Johnson remained resolute, refusing to abandon his quest to unravel the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. Finally, they spotted it. A massive, dilapidated shipwreck looming out of the mist, its ancient timbers jutting up from the waves like the bones of a long-dead beast. Captain Johnson ordered the Resolute to alter course, determined to explore the derelict vessel and uncover the secrets that it held. As they drew nearer, they could make out the remains of a once magnificent sailing ship, its hull torn and twisted as if it had been writhing in agony before finally succumbing to the sea. Cautiously, the crew lowered rowboats over the side of the Resolute, and a small expedition was formed to investigate the wreck. Captain Johnson led the way, his sword drawn and his gaze fixed on the grisly scene before them. As they rowed closer, they could see that the wreck was covered in a thick layer of seaweed and barnacles, the remains of what must have been a once glorious ship. As they climbed aboard, they were met with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant creak of timbers and the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the men couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. They split up into smaller groups, each investigating a different section of the wreck, searching for any clues that might shed light on the tragedy that had befallen her. It was Lieutenant Thomas Jenkins who stumbled upon it first, a hidden compartment within the ship's stern, its door ajar and creaking in the wind. Curiosity getting the better of him, he nudged it open and peered inside. As the dim light from his lantern illuminated the chamber, he saw it. A chest, its lid emblazoned with the crest of the Royal Navy. His heart pounded wildly as he carefully lifted the chest out of its resting place and carried it back to the Resolute. Once the chest was safely aboard the ship, Captain Johnson ordered it to be brought to the captain's quarters, where it could be opened in private. As the lid creaked open, revealing a stack of yellowed parchments and an ornate golden key, the crew looked on in awe. Captain Johnson took the key and carefully unfolded the first parchment, his eyes scanning the faded ink. As he read, a look of astonishment spread across his face. The parchments were, in fact, the personal logs of a long-lost explorer, Captain James Dyer. They detailed his journey to the Bermuda Triangle in search of a mythical island said to hold the secret to eternal life. After weeks of sailing, he had at last found the island, only to discover that it was in fact a cursed place, home to a malevolent force that had claimed the lives of all who had dared to set foot upon its shores. In a desperate attempt to break the curse, Captain Dyer had hurled his most precious possessions, including the golden key, into the sea. Captain Johnson pondered this revelation for some time, the weight of its implications heavy upon his heart. He knew that if he were to lift the curse, he must first find the island and face whatever horrors it might hold. With renewed determination, he made the decision to continue their quest, knowing full well that the price of failure might very well be their lives. The RMS Resolute sailed on, deeper into the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, its crew united in their determination to unravel the mysteries that lay before them. The wind sang through the rigging, carrying their hopes and fears alike, as they sailed ever closer to a fate that would either see them vanish forever into the mists of time or claim their place in history as the heroes who had conquered the unconquerable. The crew of the Flying Dutchman, now under Captain Samuel Johnson's command, had been sailing through the treacherous waters of the Bermuda Triangle for several weeks. They had encountered numerous strange occurrences, including the apparitions of ghostly sailors, unexplainable whispers in the night, and an eerie feeling of being watched. The once strong men had grown weak, haunted by nightmares that echoed the tragedies of lost ships and vanished souls. Determined to unravel the mysteries of the Triangle, Captain Johnson led an expedition to explore a derelict shipwreck believed to be the epicenter of the supernatural activity. As they drew nearer to the wreck, the ship's carpenter, Thomas, spotted a flickering light emanating from within the hull. Captain Johnson ordered the crew to investigate, and they soon found a hatch leading into the wreck. Using lanterns, they descended the narrow ladder into the dark interior of the ship. The air was thick with the stench of rotting wood, salt water, and something else, something unnatural. As they explored further, they discovered a cabin with its doors locked from the inside. Upon forcing them open, they found the cabin in disarray, as if a struggle had taken place. On a desk lay an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age and stained with seawater. The captain recognized it as belonging to the ship's captain, and knew that within its pages lay the key to unlocking the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. With great care, Thomas gingerly picked up the journal and began to leaf through its pages. The rest of the crew gathered around him, eager to learn the secrets that lay within. As they read, their hearts sank with dread. The journal chronicled the horrific events that had led to the ship's demise, and the fate of its crew. The captain had stumbled upon a hidden passage that led to a secret chamber deep within the ship, where he had discovered a long-forgotten artifact of immense power. This artifact, it seemed, had summoned the vengeful spirits of the lost sailors, dooming the ship and its crew to an eternal fate in the Triangle. As they continued to read, the spirits of the lost sailors began to manifest around them, their ethereal forms flickering in and out of existence. They were angry and vengeful, and they made it clear that they held the crew responsible for their deaths. The air grew thick with tension as Captain Johnson tried to reason with the spirits, promising to right the wrongs that had been done and to return them to the afterlife. The spirits, however, were not convinced. They demanded blood, and they would not rest until they had it. With each passing moment, the situation grew more dire. The crew could feel the weight of the spirits' wrath bearing down upon them, and they knew that they had to find a way out of the shipwreck alive. Thomas, the carpenter, suggested that they try to appease the spirits by performing a ritual he had heard about from an old sailor's tale. He retrieved a handful of sea salt and a few candles from his supplies and began to draw a circle around the group, reciting ancient words in a language long forgotten by time. As Thomas completed the circle, the spirits grew still, and a sense of calm descended upon the crew. Captain Johnson seized the opportunity, stepping forward and apologizing for their intrusion upon the ship and the spirits that haunted it. He promised to return the artifact to the depths from which it came, so that the spirits might finally find peace. The spirits seemed to consider his words, and for a moment, the crew held their breath, hoping for a reprieve. At last, one of the spirits stepped forward, its form shimmering in the flickering light of the candles. It spoke in a voice that was both ancient and wise, telling the crew that while they had not intended harm, their presence had disturbed the balance of the triangle. To make amends, the captain and his crew would have to complete a series of tasks to right the wrongs that had been done. Only then, the spirit said, would it consider releasing them from its wrath. Captain Johnson nodded grimly, understanding the gravity of the situation. He thanked the spirit and turned to his crew. "Men," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to consume him, "it seems we have a long road ahead of us. But if we are to survive, we must face these challenges together. We owe it to ourselves, and to the spirits of those who have come before us." The crew nodded in agreement, their faces pale but resolute. They had been given a chance to escape the triangle, but only if they were willing to risk everything to do so. As they turned back toward the passage that led to the surface, Thomas picked up the journal, slipping it into his pocket. Perhaps, he thought, the knowledge contained within its pages would help them in their quest to set things right. For now, however, their focus was on survival. They had to make it out of the Bermuda Triangle alive. As Captain Samuel Johnson and his crew of adventurers continued their perilous journey through the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, the dense fog that had enveloped them began to thin. The air grew crisp, and the distant sound of seagulls pierced the silence. The crew, once haunted by nightmares and plagued by strange occurrences, now felt a newfound sense of hope. They had reached the site of the derelict shipwreck, believed to be the epicenter of the supernatural activity that had stalked them for days. Captain Johnson ordered the crew to gather around the bow of the ship as they approached the wreck. The ship's hull creaked ominously against the jagged remains of the wreckage, the sound echoing eerily through the water. As they drew closer, the crew could make out the shadowy outline of a massive vessel, its mast snapped into and its sails torn to shreds. The name of the ship, barely visible through the rust and barnacles, was the SS Intrepid. As they scoured the wreck for clues, they spotted something wedged between two jagged pieces of timber, a leather-bound journal, its cover bearing the insignia of the Intrepid's captain. Cautiously, First Mate Thomas Jenkins retrieved the journal and brought it back to Captain Johnson. The captain opened the journal with shaking hands and began to read aloud. "My dearest family, I am writing this letter with a heavy heart, as I know that I will not survive the night. The Bermuda Triangle has claimed our ship, the SS Intrepid, and I fear that my crew will soon join me in the depths below. I have come to believe that our fate was sealed the moment we discovered the ancient artifact that we brought aboard. It is a relic of a time long forgotten, a time when the gods themselves walked the earth. We should have left it buried, but greed clouded our judgment. I have seen things that no mortal man should ever see. Creatures from the deep, twisted and warped by the power of the artifact. They have taken my crew, one by one, leaving only me alive to bear witness to their terrible fate. I beg of you, whoever finds this journal, do not make the same mistake we did. Destroy the artifact, or bury it deep where it can no longer wreak havoc upon the world. Our souls may already be lost, but perhaps you can save yours." The crew listened in silence as Captain Johnson read the final words of the Intrepid's captain. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, and they could not help but feel a sense of dread creeping over them. Despite this, they knew that they had to continue their quest to uncover the truth and end the curse that had plagued the Bermuda Triangle for centuries. As they explored the wreck, they discovered a hidden compartment beneath the captain's quarters. Inside, they found the ancient artifact that the Intrepid's crew had discovered, a golden amulet encrusted with precious gems and strange, unreadable symbols. As they lifted the amulet from its resting place, a chill ran down their spines, and they could sense the power that it held. Captain Johnson knew that they could not simply destroy the artifact, as the captain of the Intrepid had suggested. They needed to find a way to harness its power and use it for the greater good. As they pondered their next move, they were suddenly surrounded by the ghostly forms of the Intrepid's crew, their faces etched with anger and betrayal. The captain turned to face the apparitions, determined to make amends for their trespass. "We meant no harm," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "We only sought to understand the artifact and its purpose. We did not know the depths of your suffering." The spirits seemed to waver for a moment, and then, as if coming to a decision, they began to fade away. In their place, the captain of the Intrepid appeared, his face weary but his eyes filled with understanding. "You must find a way to release us from our torment," he said. "Only then can the curse be broken, and the Bermuda Triangle be restored to its former peace." Captain Johnson nodded, grateful for the guidance. Together, they devised a plan to perform a ritual at the site of the wreck, using the artifact as a focal point. As they prepared for the ceremony, they could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them, and the knowledge that their actions would determine the fate of countless others. The sun was setting as they gathered around the amulet, the last rays of light reflecting off its golden surface. Captain Johnson raised his voice, addressing both the spirits of the Intrepid and the crew of his own ship. "We come before you today to make amends for our trespass," he began. "We take responsibility for the suffering we have caused, and we beg your forgiveness." The spirits, both living and dead, seemed to hang in the air, waiting for their next move. Captain Johnson continued, his voice strong and clear. "We vow to use the power of the artifact to right the wrongs that have been done, and to bring peace to the Bermuda Triangle once more." As he spoke, the amulet began to glow with an ethereal light, and the air around them seemed to hum with energy. The spirits of the Intrepid nodded in approval, and the captain could feel their burden begin to lift. Finally, the captain lowered the amulet to the ocean floor, burying it deep where it could no longer cause harm. As the last of the light faded from the artifact, the spirits of the Intrepid disappeared, leaving only the gentle lapping of the waves against the hull of the ship. Captain Johnson turned to face his crew, his eyes filled with tears. "We have done it," he said. "We have set the Bermuda Triangle free." As the crew of the ship looked out over the ocean, they could see a newfound sense of hope spreading across the water. The curse had been broken, and the ancient evil that had plagued the sea for centuries had been laid to rest. They knew that they had been tested, and that they had emerged stronger for it. They would take this lesson with them, and use it to guide them through the rest of their journey. The world was a vast and mysterious place, full of wonder and danger, and they would face it head-on, armed with the knowledge they had gained in the Bermuda Triangle. The ship continued on its journey, leaving the wreck of the Intrepid behind them. The crew would never forget the sacrifices that had been made, and they vowed to honor the memory of those who had passed before them. The future, they knew, held both peril and promise. But with the curse broken and the spirits of the Intrepid finally at peace, they felt confident that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The air is thick with a mixture of relief and exhaustion as Captain Samuel Johnson and his crew emerge from the depths of the shipwreck. They have survived the terrors that plagued them for days, and with the help of the forgiving spirits, they have managed to navigate their way back to their vessel. The once haunted eyes of the crew now gleam with a newfound determination, their steps firmer as they move towards their goal, to break the curse that has held them captive in the Bermuda Triangle. Captain Johnson, his face etched with the lines of exhaustion and determination, surveys the wreckage around them. He turns to his first mate, Mr. Gray, and nods. "Mr. Gray, see to it that the artifact is securely stowed away. We must not let it fall into the wrong hands." Mr. Gray nods grimly, his grip on the artifact tightening as he begins to make his way back to the ship. As they near their vessel, the crew is greeted by the sight of their ship's doctor, Dr. Emerson, standing at the railing, his arms folded across his chest. "Well," he says, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "that didn't take long. I was beginning to think we'd be stuck in there for good." Captain Johnson returns the smile, feeling a surge of gratitude towards his trusted friend and confidant. The crew boards the ship, their movements now efficient and practiced, as if they have been sailing together for years. They quickly set about the tasks of repairing the damage the ship has sustained and restoring it to working order. The atmosphere on board is tense but focused, each crew member acutely aware of the responsibility they now bear to keep the secret of the shipwreck and its cursed artifact safe from the world. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting the ocean in shades of gold and pink, Captain Johnson gathers his crew around him. They sit on wooden crates and barrels, their backs against the ship's railing, watching the waves lap against the hull. "We have been through hell and back," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "but we have survived. And now we must decide what to do with that knowledge." There is a moment of silence as the crew considers his words. The spirits of the forgiven sailors, their anger now replaced by a sense of peace and serenity, drift around them, watching with silent approval. It is the ship's navigator, Mr. White, who finally breaks the silence. "Captain," he says, "I believe we have a duty to keep this secret. The world is not yet ready for what we have seen, and what we now know." Captain Johnson nods solemnly. "Agreed," he says. "We will sail on, never letting anyone know of the shipwreck or its secrets. But we must also remember the lessons we have learned. The importance of respecting the natural world, and the consequences of meddling in things that is beyond our understanding." The crew nods in unison, each face etched with a newfound wisdom and a profound respect for the mysteries of the sea. And as the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, they turn their attention back to the task at hand, to navigate the treacherous waters of the Bermuda Triangle, forever bearing the weight of their terrible secret. The wind picks up, billowing the sails and carrying them away from the shipwreck, further and further from the cursed island and the dark secrets it holds. For now, at least, they are safe, but they know that the memory of what they have seen and experienced will stay with them forever, a constant reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of the ocean, waiting to claim the unwary and the foolish. Captain Samuel Johnson and his crew, having escaped the clutches of the Bermuda Triangle and its cursed shipwreck, find themselves on the open sea once more. The sky is a brilliant blue, the air is salty and crisp, and the sun is warm on their faces. But even as they bask in the relief of their narrow escape, they cannot shake the weight of their discovery, the powerful artifact they retrieved from the wreckage. It is a reminder that their journey has only just begun, and that the choices they make from here on out will shape not only their own fates, but the fate of the world. The crew gathers around Captain Johnson as he stands at the helm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Man," he begins, his voice strong and steady, "we have faced many dangers in our journey thus far, but I fear that the most perilous part is yet to come. For we are in possession of a great power, one that could be used for both good and evil." He pauses, letting the gravity of his words sink in. "We must decide what to do with this artifact, and the choice is not an easy one." As they sail through the open ocean, the crew spends long hours poring over the few scraps of information they have about the artifact. It was once wielded by a sorcerer named Alistair Drake, who had used its arcane energies to shape the very fabric of reality. But when his ship was dragged into the Bermuda Triangle, he and the artifact were lost to history. It is clear that the world has been safe from Drake's machinations for centuries, but now that they have found the artifact, they must decide whether to keep it hidden or to use it for their own purposes. The debate rages on amongst the crew, with opinions divided sharply. Some argue that the artifact should be destroyed, lest it fall into the wrong hands and unleash untold destruction upon the world. Others believe that it should be studied and harnessed for the greater good, using its power to heal the sick and famine, and bring about a new age of enlightenment. Still others suggest that they simply keep it hidden, ensuring that no one else ever finds it and learns its secrets. As they sail closer to land, they begin to receive word from other ships and ports, all eager to hear their tale of adventure and discovery. News of the artifact spreads like wildfire, and soon they find themselves besieged by representatives of various governments and secret societies, all vying for a piece of the action. Captain Johnson knows that he must make a decision soon, for the longer they wait, the more likely it is that the artifact will fall into the wrong hands. One night, as they are huddled around a crackling fire, Captain Johnson is awoken by a dream. He sees himself standing before a great throne, its seat empty and its arms adorned with the symbols of many different kingdoms and empires. Before him lies the artifact, its glowing surface reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. In the dream, he hears a voice, deep and resonant, that seems to echo through the very fabric of reality. "You have been chosen, Captain Johnson," it says, "to wield the power of the shard. It is a burden that few can bear, but with it comes the responsibility to shape the fate of the world." The next morning, Captain Johnson gathers his crew once more. He tells them of his dream, and of the weighty responsibility that now rests upon their shoulders. After much deliberation, they decide that the only course of action is to form their own secret society, one dedicated to using the shard's power for the greater good. They will keep its existence hidden from the world, ensuring that only they can wield its awesome power. And so, with the sun setting on the horizon, Captain Samuel Johnson and his crew set sail once more, their mission clear. They will create a new order, one where the shard's power is used to bring peace and prosperity to a world long plagued by strife and suffering. It is a daunting task, but they are resolute in their determination to see it through, for they know that the fate of the world rests in their hands, and that the choices they make today will echo through the ages. Captain Samuel Johnson's heart was heavy as he stepped back onto dry land. The knowledge of what they had found and the power it contained weighed heavily on his shoulders. He knew that they had to keep it hidden, away from those who might use it for their own gain or unleash its destructive potential upon the world. With a deep sigh, he gathered his crew around him and addressed them. "Man," he began, his voice solemn and strong, "what we discovered out there, in the depths of the Bermuda Triangle, was not meant for mortal hands. It is a relic of a time when men played gods, and paid the price. We must ensure that history does not repeat itself." There was a murmur of agreement among the crew, each man nodding solemnly. Captain Johnson continued, "I have decided that we will form a team, consisting of trusted advisors and scholars, to study this artifact and its history. We will build a secret vault, far from prying eyes, to house it until we can determine its true purpose and find a way to neutralize its power." The crew nodded in unison, understanding the gravity of their situation. They had been through too much to let their discoveries fall into the wrong hands. Captain Johnson looked around at their faces, each one etched with determination and a profound sense of duty. "Let us begin," he said, his voice firm. "We must act swiftly and decisively. The fate of the world may depend on us." As they dispersed, Captain Johnson called out to his first mate, "Mr. Smith, please gather the artifact and see to it that it is placed in the care of our appointed scholars. We must not lose sight of it, nor let it out of our possession, until we have uncovered all of its secrets." Mr. Smith nodded and, with a heavy heart, took the artifact, wrapping it carefully in layers of cloth and placing it in a strong box. Over the next several weeks, Captain Johnson assembled a team of advisors, including historians, linguists, and cryptographers. They worked tirelessly, translating ancient texts, deciphering cryptic messages, and piecing together the fragmented history of the artifact. As they delved deeper into the mystery, they began to uncover clues that pointed to the existence of other relics like it, scattered across the globe. One of the scholars, an elderly gentleman by the name of Dr. Weston, approached Captain Johnson with a look of both excitement and trepidation. "Captain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "it appears that the artifact we found is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. There are other artifacts, scattered across the globe, that share a similar history and purpose. Finding them could be of paramount importance." Captain Johnson's heart raced at the implications of this revelation. The fate of the world truly hung in the balance. He considered their options carefully, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. In the end, he made a decision that would change the course of history. "Then we must find them," he said decisively. "We cannot allow such power to fall into the wrong hands." With that, Captain Johnson and his trusted team set out on a new quest, journeying across the globe in search of the other artifacts. They faced countless dangers and obstacles along the way, but their determination and unwavering sense of duty drove them forward. As they uncovered each artifact, they grew closer to unraveling the mysteries of the ancient civilization that had created them. Years passed, and Captain Johnson's crew continued their search, never forgetting the weight of the responsibility they carried. They knew that with each artifact they recovered, they brought humanity one step closer to either salvation or destruction. The world watched with bated breath as they worked tirelessly to ensure that the balance of power did not tip in favor of those who sought to use the artifacts for their own gain. In the end, it was Captain Johnson's unwavering leadership and his crew's unbreakable bond of trust and loyalty that saw them through to the end. They recovered all of the artifacts and, with the help of their team of advisors, managed to neutralize their power and ensure that they could never again be used to manipulate the fate of the world. As the years passed, Captain Johnson and his crew faded into history, their names forgotten by all but a few. But the world they left behind was forever changed, and the legacy they had fought so hard to protect would live on for generations to come. It was a legacy built on the foundation of duty, honor, and the unyielding determination to protect the innocent from those who would do them harm. And it was a legacy that would inspire countless others to take up the mantle of leadership and carry on the fight for a better tomorrow. Captain Johnson and his team of trusted advisors, including scholars and historians, had been studying the artifact they'd recovered from the shipwreck for months. It was clear that the artifact was of immense power and had been used by a sorcerer to manipulate reality centuries ago. As they delved deeper into its history, they discovered that there were other artifacts like it scattered across the globe, each hidden away in secret locations. The team soon came to the conclusion that it was imperative to find and recover these artifacts before they fell into the wrong hands. Captain Johnson gathered his most experienced crew members and prepared his ship for the journey ahead. The first stop on their quest was an ancient temple deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. According to their research, an artifact similar to the one they'd found was rumored to be hidden within its labyrinthine depths. The journey down the Amazon was treacherous, with the crew battling against the relentless heat, dense foliage, and unpredictable river currents. After several weeks of travel, they finally spotted the temple rising out of the mist. The temple itself was a marvel of ancient architecture, carved from black basalt and adorned with intricate reliefs depicting long-forgotten gods and mythical beasts. The air around it hummed with a sense of ancient power. As they approached the temple, they were met by a group of hostile natives who demanded that they turn back. Captain Johnson, sensing the urgency of their mission, tried to reason with them, but to no avail. The natives were protective of their sacred site and would not allow outsiders to desecrate it. A tense standoff ensued, with both sides preparing for battle. It was at this moment that one of the crew members, a seasoned scholar named Dr. Westbrook, stepped forward. He spoke to the natives in their native tongue, revealing that he had spent years studying their culture and language. The natives were astonished and impressed by his fluency, and they immediately hailed him as a gifted shaman. Dr. Westbrook used this newfound status to convince the tribe to allow them to enter the temple and retrieve the artifact. After gaining the tribe's trust, they were led deep into the heart of the temple. The air inside grew colder, and the light seemed to shift as they descended deeper into the earth. Eventually, they reached a massive stone door guarded by a terrifying statue of a serpent god. The statue's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its mouth was agape, revealing a mouthful of razor-sharp fangs. Captain Johnson and his crew prepared for battle, but Dr. Westbrook urged them to try a different approach. He suspected that the statue was a guardian designed to protect the artifact from those who were not pure of heart. He proposed that they perform a ritual to appease the serpent god, offering it a series of sacrifices in exchange for safe passage. Reluctantly, Captain Johnson agreed to the plan. The ritual was long and arduous, requiring the crew to offer up precious artifacts and gifts as offerings to the serpent god. As they performed the rite, they could feel the power in the air growing stronger, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around them. Finally, the statue's eyes dimmed, and its mouth closed with a click. The door swung open, revealing a chamber filled with a strange, pulsing light. Inside lay the second artifact. Captain Johnson and his crew carefully retrieved the artifact, feeling its power coursing through their veins. They knew that they had to move swiftly now, as they had no doubt that other treasure hunters and rival organizations were on their trail. As they made their way back to the surface, they discussed their next move. The artifact they'd recovered would grant them incredible power, but it also carried a heavy burden. They knew that they must use their newfound abilities wisely and for the greater good. Their journey continued, taking them to the frozen wastes of Antarctica, where they found an artifact hidden within a long-lost city of ice. Then, to the scorching deserts of Egypt, where they battled against a cunning thief who sought to steal their artifact for himself. Throughout it all, Captain Johnson and his crew remained resolute in their quest, their bond of trust and loyalty growing stronger with each passing day. Finally, after many months of travel and countless challenges, they stood before the last known location of the final artifact. They knew that their journey was nearly at an end, and that the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. As they stepped into the ancient temple, bathed in the ethereal glow of the setting sun, they could feel the weight of history bearing down upon them. The air was thick with anticipation and a sense of impending doom, for they knew that once they recovered the final artifact, there would be no turning back. The world would never be the same again. The journey had been long and arduous, fraught with danger at every turn. Captain Johnson and his trusted team of advisors had spent years scouring the globe, searching for the final artifact that would unite the others and grant them access to unimaginable power. Now, at long last, they had found it. They had tracked it down to a hidden chamber deep within the heart of a forgotten temple, hidden high in the mountains of an uncharted island. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers and the sounds of birdsong, but there was an unsettling stillness that hung over the temple grounds, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Captain Johnson stood before the massive stone door that guarded the chamber, his heart racing with equal parts excitement and trepidation. He glanced at his team, each of them battle-hardened and weary from their journey, but resolute in their determination to see this through. They had all come to accept the enormous responsibility that rested upon their shoulders, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. With a deep breath, Captain Johnson reached out and grasped the ornate handle that protruded from the center of the stone door. With a groan, it swung open, revealing the dimly lit chamber beyond. Torches flickered on the walls, casting long, sinister shadows across the floor, and a strange, otherworldly light seemed to emanate from the artifact at the chamber's center. It was larger than any of them had expected, its surface etched with ancient glyphs and runes that seemed to dance before their eyes. Captain Johnson stepped cautiously into the chamber, his boots crunching on a layer of dust that coated the floor. His team followed close behind, their weapons drawn but their hands trembling with anticipation. They moved forward until they were standing in a loose circle around the artifact, each of them taking in its majesty and trying to comprehend the power that it represented. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was deafening, and the weight of the decision they had to make threatened to crush them all. Then, Captain Johnson cleared his throat and addressed his team. "We have come so far, and sacrificed so much," he began. "Now, we must decide what to do with this power." His words hung in the air, echoing through the chamber and bouncing off the ancient walls. The scholar, Dr. Wells, stepped forward, her face etched with worrying. "Captain, we have uncovered evidence that suggests this power was meant to be used for good," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious trepidation. "If we use it wisely, we could change the world for the better." The historian, Professor Thorne, nodded in agreement. "Indeed, Dr. Wells. The artifacts were created by an ancient civilization that sought to bring peace and prosperity to all of humanity. It would be a travesty to ignore their intentions now." The archaeologist, Dr. Carver, however, looked less certain. But what if we're wrong? He asked, his voice tinged with doubt. What if this power was meant for something darker? We must consider all the possibilities before we make our decision. Captain Johnson listened intently to each of their arguments, weighing the pros and cons in his mind. He glanced at the artifact, its surface seeming to shift and change with each passing moment, as if it were alive and trying to communicate with them. Finally, he turned back to his team, his face etched with determination. We have come too far, and sacrificed too much, to simply walk away now, he said. We must finish what we have started. There was a murmur of agreement from his team, but it was clear that they were far from unanimous in their decision. The marine biologist, Dr. Lopez, stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. Captain, I understand your desire for closure, but we cannot ignore the consequences of our actions, she said, her voice trembling. We must consider the ramifications of our decision for generations to come. Captain Johnson met her gaze, his own eyes filling with sadness. He knew that she was right, but he also knew that there was no turning back now. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Very well, he said, his voice firm. Let us proceed. With a nod to his team, Captain Johnson began to perform the ritual that would unite the artifacts, his movements precise and practiced. As he chanted the ancient words, the air around them seemed to shimmer and warp, and the artifact at the center of the chamber began to glow brighter and brighter, its light casting long, twisting shadows across the floor. Slowly, inexorably, the glow spread outward, encompassing each of the artifacts in turn. There was a flash of blinding light, and then it was over. When the light faded, they were all left standing in the center of the chamber, their bodies glowing with an inner light. The power of the artifacts coursed through their veins, and they felt as if they could move mountains with a single thought. Captain Johnson looked at his team, his heart swelling with pride and sorrow. They had done it. They had achieved their goal. But at what cost? The weight of their decision bore down upon them, and they knew that they would have to live with the consequences for the rest of their lives. Dr. Lopez stepped forward, her face etched with determination. Captain, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Let us use this power wisely, and with the greatest of care. Let us honor the intentions of those who came before us, and leave the world a better place than we found it. Captain Johnson nodded, his eyes shining with envious tears. Aye, Dr. Lopez, he replied. We shall do our best. With that, they turned and walked out of the chamber, their steps heavy with the weight of their decision and the knowledge of the power that now coursed through their veins. They had become something more than human, but they were still fallible and capable of making mistakes. The fate of the world now rested in their hands, and they could only hope that they would be up to the task. Thank you so much for joining me on this cinematic journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Have you experienced a spine-chilling horror that left you trembling? Share your terrifying tale with us by emailing nightmarenetwork@hotmail.com, and we'd be thrilled to feature it on our platform. Until next time, happy movie watching.